You know, every single thing we own, from the chair you're sitting on to the phone in your hand, it has a secret life. It starts out as just an idea, then it becomes a real thing, and eventually, well, where does it all go? So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that whole hidden story.
I mean, really think about it. That phone you're holding, or that's sitting in your pocket right now, it didn't just magically appear. It's actually the very last step in this huge, complicated journey that spans the entire globe. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow that story, right from the beginning.
You see, every product, and I mean every product, doesn't start on an assembly line. It starts as just an idea. So that's where we're headed first, into the world of design, to see how a little spark of a thought starts to become a real, physical thing.
Okay, so why do we even get new products? Well, it pretty much boils down to two main drivers. First, you've got market pull. That's pretty simple. It's us. It's what we, the customers, say we want. We demand something new or a different style, and designers respond. But then there's the other side of the coin, technology push. This is the really interesting one. This is when some new invention, like say the very first touchscreen, just appears. It creates this whole new category of products that, honestly, we never even knew we wanted until we saw it.
All right, so once that idea is nailed down, it's time to draw up the plans, right? To make the blueprint. And today, that starts with something called CAD, which stands for Computer-Aided Design. Basically, engineers build this perfect 3D digital model of the product right on a computer. They can test it, tweak it, perfect it, all digitally. Then, once that digital blueprint is absolutely perfect, it gets handed over to CAM, or Computer-Aided Manufacturing. And CAM is what takes that digital file and translates it into instructions that real-world machines can understand. And you can see here what that looks like. On one side, you've got the digital design, the CAD drawing. It's just pixels on a screen. And on the other, you've got the CAM process in action, a machine, like a CNC mill, that's taking those exact digital instructions and physically carving out the object. It's that incredible moment where it jumps from the digital world to the physical one.
Now, it's no surprise that a lot of these machines in the factory are, well, robots. And the pros are pretty clear, right? Robots are super fast, they're incredibly accurate, and they can do the same repetitive or even dangerous task over and over without getting tired. But it's not all upsides. For starters, the setup cost is massive. And then there's the big one. Automation can, and often does, replace human jobs. Plus, for all their precision, robots aren't great at thinking on their feet. If something unexpected goes wrong, they can't really get creative and solve the problem like a person could.
Okay, so we've got our design, we've got our automated factory all ready to go. But there's one giant missing piece, isn't there? None of it works without power. And we're talking about a ton of power. And that's our next big topic, the incredible amount of energy it takes to actually make all this stuff.
And right away, we run into a really difficult choice. On one side, you have your finite fuels. Think coal, oil, and gas. They're popular for a reason. They're relatively cheap, they're everywhere, and they're reliable. But the downsides are huge. They cause all sorts of pollution, like acid rain, and, well, the name says it all, they're finite. They're going to run out eventually. Then, on the other side, you have renewables, wind, solar, water power. They're way better for the environment, obviously. But they have their own problems. The supply can be really unreliable. You know, the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing, and the cost to get them set up in the first place is pretty high.
You know, when you look at how we generate power, it can seem really complicated. But what's fascinating is that most power plants, whether they're burning fossil fuels or using nuclear energy, work on the same basic, almost simple idea. You just use some kind of fuel to heat up water, which creates a whole lot of high-pressure steam. And that steam is then used to spin a turbine which generates electricity. It's pretty much a giant, high-tech kettle, when you think about it.
All right, fast forward. Our product is made, it's polished, it's packed up in a box, it's ready to go. We're done, right? Well, not really. Because that's not the end of the story. If we really want to understand the life of our stuff, we have to ask a much bigger, more complicated question. What did it truly cost to make this?
And this is where we get into the hidden costs, the stuff that you just don't see on the price tag. We're talking about the real impact on our planet and also on the people who actually make these things for us.
A huge piece of that puzzle is what we call the carbon footprint. And what's super important to get here is that this isn't just about the pollution from the factory. It's so much bigger than that. It's the grand total of all the greenhouse gases released during the product's entire life, from digging the raw materials out of the ground to shipping it across the world to the power it uses every day in your home, all the way to what happens when you finally throw it away.
But like we said, the true cost isn't just about the environment. There's a human side to it too. And this quote really nails it. It says that companies have both a moral and a legal responsibility to make sure their employees have safe working conditions. That means things like having the right safety equipment, making sure the building is safe. All of that is part of the true cost of a product.
Okay, now here's a really sneaky hidden cost. What if I told you that a lot of the things you buy are actually designed to break? It's a real thing, and it's called planned obsolescence. It's this whole business strategy where a product is intentionally made with a limited lifespan or designed to go out of style super fast. Why? Simple. So you have to go out and buy the next new model.
So what does it actually look like in the real world? Well, have you ever had a phone where the battery dies, but you can't replace it because it's literally glued inside? That's it. That's planned obsolescence. But the good news is, people are starting to fight back against this throwaway culture. And a big part of the solution is this idea of modular design. Instead of buying a whole new phone, what if you could just pop out the old camera and pop in a new, better one? That's the idea. Upgrading parts instead of the whole thing.
So all of this brings us to the final chapter in the secret life of our stuff. What happens at the very end? When we're done with it, where does it actually go? For way too many of our gadgets and electronics, this right here is the end of the story. It's a huge mountain of what we call e-waste. And the crazy thing is, it's full of two things: really nasty toxic chemicals and incredibly precious, valuable materials. It's a huge problem, but it doesn't have to be this way. This doesn't have to be the end of the line.
The answer is to think bigger than just recycling. We all know the classic 3 Rs, right? Well, this framework expands that to 6. So you have repair, fixing things instead of tossing them; reuse, giving something a second life; and recycle, breaking down the materials to make something new. But the ones that can make the biggest difference are maybe the other 3. Rethink, do I actually need this? Reduce, just consuming less overall. And refuse, saying no to things you don't need, like all that extra plastic packaging.
But what's really powerful is when we take this kind of thinking and apply it way back at the very beginning of the process. And that's the whole idea behind design for disassembly. It's exactly what it sounds like, designing products from day one so they can be easily taken apart at the end of their life. Just imagine, instead of a phone that's sealed shut with industrial-strength glue, you have one that's held together with a few simple screws. When it's time to upgrade, you could easily take it apart, and every single valuable little piece inside could be recovered and used to make a brand new product. It closes the loop.
So there you have it. From just a tiny idea in someone's head, to the massive amount of energy needed to power a factory, to all those hidden costs, and all the way to its final resting place, the story of our stuff is way more complicated and fascinating than we usually think. So the real question is, now that you know its secrets, how will you help change the ending of the story?